Welcome to Dinar Intel Hub. Today's updates around the Iraqi dinar are painting a much clearer picture of where Iraq's economy might be headed in the months ahead. Some of these stories might seem like nothing special at first glance, but when you look at all of them together through a long-term dinar lens, there are real signals here that investors and followers need to be watching closely. The first big update comes from Shafaq News about Iraq stepping up its use of Jordan's Aqaba port while shipping through the Strait of Hormuz stays shaky. Honestly, this is one of the most important stories right now because it shows Iraq taking action to protect its own supply chain rather than just sitting back and waiting for things to calm down in the region. Iraq is moving food, industrial goods, oil, and building materials through backup routes, and that means a lot more than most people give it credit for. For a long time, one of Iraq's biggest economic weak spots has been leaning too hard on just a few trade paths. Every time regional tension flares up, it immediately squeezes imports, pushes up transportation costs, and shakes up local markets. What Baghdad is doing right now is building room to breathe into the system. From a dinar standpoint, that kind of flexibility builds confidence. Countries that are serious about long-term financial stability never depend on just one trade route. They spread out early, and that looks like exactly what Iraq is doing right now. I also think this points to something bigger going on behind closed doors. Iraq seems focused on cutting off the pressure points that could shake up its internal markets down the road. That does not mean some big currency move is happening tomorrow morning, but it absolutely supports the bigger pattern of economic groundwork and structural buildup that serious watchers have been tracking for several years now. Another key story came from Reuters and Shafaq News covering oil prices and ongoing uncertainty around Middle East shipping lanes. Oil is still Iraq's financial engine, and as long as crude prices stay high, Iraq keeps pulling in strong revenue. That naturally helps the dinar because it builds up reserves and keeps the government's cash position healthy. But here is where paying attention to the details really matters. Strong oil prices alone are not enough anymore. The real issue now is whether exports can move reliably. Iraq can lock in great prices for its oil, but if shipping routes stay at risk, there is always a cloud hanging over future revenue. This is exactly why Iraq's push toward new trade corridors becomes even more critical. Baghdad clearly gets it that protecting export flow is just as important as keeping oil prices high. Markets are also starting to wake up to the fact that full stability in the Strait of Hormuz could take a lot longer than anyone first expected. That creates both a window of opportunity and a real risk for Iraq. The opportunity is that higher energy prices keep national income strong. The risk is that logistical problems and delayed exports create headaches. The way I see it, Iraq's leadership is trying to get ahead of that problem instead of scrambling to fix things after the damage is already done. One of the most underreported stories was about transit activity reopening through Syria. According to Shafaq News, cargo moving from Romania through Tartus and into Iraq marks the first major international transit movement through that route in over 10 years. This might sound like just another shipping update, but strategically it is a much bigger deal than it looks. Trade corridors are the lifeblood of any economy. When Iraq opens up access through Syria and Türkiye while also reopening border crossings, it deepens regional commercial ties. More trade moving through means more customs activity, stronger logistics, better transportation networks, and wider long-term economic involvement. These are exactly the kinds of developments that build economic confidence over time. I have said this many times before. Before any country can seriously boost its monetary position, it first has to strengthen the movement of goods, regional access, and economic coordination. Iraq looks like it is actively working on all three of those things at the same time. This is not wishful thinking. This is real, practical economic positioning. Now let's get into the more cautious update about Iraq quietly dropping off the list of major foreign holders of U.S. Treasury securities again. This story is worth paying attention to because it ties directly into how Iraq manages its international reserves. Some people are going to read that headline and immediately panic, but I think a more level-headed take makes more sense here. Dropping off that list does not automatically mean Iraq's reserves are in bad shape. It could mean reserve reshuffling, spreading assets across different holdings, or a deliberate shift in how Iraq handles its external positions. That said, international markets do keep a close eye on these signals. Transparency and reserve confidence still matter a lot when it comes to long-term monetary credibility. From where I stand, this is not a crisis signal for the dinar right now, but it is absolutely something worth keeping an eye on. What counts most is whether Iraq keeps its overall reserve strength solid and continues holding the internal exchange rate steady. So far, nothing in the market suggests people are freaking out over this. That brings us to what is happening in local currency markets. According to Shafaq News, the dollar stayed relatively steady in Baghdad and Erbil, trading around the same levels seen in recent sessions. This is actually more significant than a lot of casual followers realize. Holding steady during a stretch of regional tension is a real positive sign. In past years, heavy geopolitical stress usually sent Iraq's street market into a tailspin. The fact that exchange rates are staying relatively controlled right now suggests the Central Bank of Iraq is still doing a solid job managing liquidity and keeping the market balanced. Stable exchange behavior takes the edge off fear, cuts down on speculation, and keeps excessive dollar demand from building up inside the country. Stepping back and looking at the full picture, what is developing here is a story of economic adaptation. Iraq is not sitting on its hands waiting for the outside world to get better. It is actively opening up new trade routes, protecting imports, keeping energy revenue flowing, reopening regional transit systems, and holding exchange stability together even while the broader region stays under pressure. For serious Dinar Intel Hub followers, these are the kinds of structural signals that actually deserve your attention. None of this locks in an overnight revaluation, and anyone doing honest analysis needs to steer clear of pumping up unrealistic expectations. But these developments do support the case that Iraq keeps moving towards stronger economic functionality and deeper regional integration. That is the real takeaway from today's reports. The pattern is always going to matter more than any one headline. Thanks for watching Dinar Intel Hub. Stay grounded, stay informed, and always keep your eye on the long-term economic picture rather than getting caught up in the emotional noise of the moment.